more from the book The Haunted Self on structural dissociation. This part is on a type of EPs that are protector parts. There are two related types of EPs that attempt to protect, often in extremely self-destructive ways. Fight and persecutory dissociative parts of the personality. So fight and persecutory are two different types. A third type is more directly helpful, supporting the individual in more mature and functional ways to adapt to daily life, often with a strong degree of observing wisdom. However, it usually has not personalized much of the patient's life. The first two types are both defensive in nature, fixated in the protective fight-defensive subsystem, and attempt to maintain the difficult emotions of rage and anger, and to avoid feelings of hurt, fear, or shame. Within their specific action system, these EPs have a narrowed attention to anything that they regard as a threat. However, they are often unable to differentiate what is threatening and what is not. They have such generalized conditioning that a host of stimuli evoke a rigid defensive reaction. Contact with the therapist will evoke these EPs because they are conditioned to avoid attachment, dependence, and emotional needs. Fight EPs are part of the fight defensive subsystem and have the explicit function of protecting the survivor both internally and from perceived external threat. They have defensive substitute beliefs, such as the idea that they are strong, unhurt, and capable of carrying out strong actions of rage and revenge. Often, these parts view themselves as a tough child or a teenager or a large, strong man and present with bravado in therapy. Quote unquote, I don't need anything from you, and they, meaning the other parts, don't need you either. You'd better leave them alone. Persecutory EPs tend to experience and present themselves as the original perpetrators engaged in the original traumatic actions. This non-realization may reach delusional proportions, but it is merely another type of substitute belief. Persecutory EPs are often more inner-directed, responding not only to external but also to internal perceived threat, such as the crying of an EP that is fixated in traumatic memories. Without the ability to mentalize perpetrators, to create symbolic representations, children may take in the introject, or the bad object that is the perpetrators. Thus, as EPs, they claim they are the abuser and not the abused, and have the affects and behaviors of a perpetrator to varying degrees. In this sense, these EPs often cannot distinguish internal reality from external reality. Many traumatized individuals are tormented by these internal perpetrators as though the abuse were continuing. Persecutory EPs may also enact representations of the traumatic experience from the child's perception of the perpetrator's viewpoint. For example, I will act and think in the manner in which I perceived my father to act and think. Both fight and persecutory EPs may intrude forcefully on AMP with self-destructive actions such as self-harming or purging, and may dominate consciousness. They may act out towards the therapist or towards others in the patient's life, while the ANP is amnesic of such barriers or has awareness but no behavioral control. Other protectors are mediated by the action systems of caretaking, or more simply, the elaboration of a peritraumatic observing part. Caretaking parts are more actively involved in managing the system of dissociative parts of the personality, though their ability may be more or less limited. Although these parts are primarily mediated by the caretaking system, they usually have a lack of awareness of self-care and become easily depleted. Their awareness is limited to the needs of others internally or externally, and thus they will have little ability to play, explore, or socialize. It is imperative that the therapist not rely too heavily on such dissociative parts, as it will only reinforce their retracted field of consciousness to caretaking and not to other action systems. The next group of passages that I'm going to read from this book is on how young children end up with structural dissociation, and on the important role of attachment with structural dissociation. So follow me if you don't want to miss it.